Why is beating the dollar not within the yuan's reach? Tension rises in the Middle East. Movement begins in the oil market. Investors around the world become restless. On news channels, the same old question returns again. Is the dollar's dominance now going to end? Can China's yuan become the world's new global currency in the coming time? And can groups like BRICS come together to push the dollar behind? The fear begins here, because if the dollar's grip weakens, it can affect not just America, but the entire world's trade, oil payments, reserves, imports, exports, and loan system. For countries like India too, this is a big question, because our oil imports, foreign trade, and currency stability are connected somewhere with the dollar system. If the world's reserve currency changes, it will no longer remain just an economics news story, but a story that reaches every country's policy, business, and the common man's pocket. And curiosity is born here. China is such a big exporter, the world's manufacturing powerhouse. Its trade network is massive. Yet why is its yuan not able to replace the dollar? If the world buys goods from China, trades with China, and BRICS countries talk about reducing dollar dependency, then what is stopping the yuan from becoming a global currency? The answer is hidden not just in trade, but in trust, financial markets, capital controls, and political confidence. In an interview given to the South China Morning Post, economist Daniel Gross explained this question through the example of the euro. His major argument was that a currency becoming global does not depend only on how large that country's trade is. If that were the case, China's yuan would have challenged the dollar long ago. But to become a global currency, the world does not only need a country that sells goods. The world needs a currency in which big investors can keep their money without fear, withdraw it, sell it, and get immediate liquidity whenever needed. The real strength of the dollar is not just America's GDP or military power. The dollar's strength lies in its deep and liquid financial markets. Central banks, sovereign wealth funds, and big investors across the world prefer US Treasury bonds because they are considered safe, transparent, and easily buyable and sellable assets. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, by the third quarter of 2025, the share of dollar-denominated securities in global foreign exchange reserves was around 57%, which clearly shows the dollar's dominance. This is where the yuan's first big weakness becomes clear. China's economy is large. Its trade is large, its exports are large, but its financial market is not as open, transparent, and freely accessible as the dollar system. If a foreign investor buys dollar assets in America, he knows that he can buy and sell them on a large scale whenever needed. But with yuan assets, there is still fear linked to capital controls, policy, uncertainty, and government intervention. In simple language, capital control means that the government controls the movement of money in and out. China keeps restrictions on capital flows to keep its currency and financial stability under control. This may be useful for China in terms of domestic stability, but this becomes the biggest hurdle on the path to becoming a global currency, because only that currency becomes the world's reserve currency, which the world can freely hold, trade, and convert. An analysis by the European Central Bank also says the same thing. The renminbi, meaning the yuan, cannot fully become an international reserve currency until China's capital account is fully liberalized. To become a reserve currency, it is necessary that the currency can be easily bought and sold in global markets, and history also shows that leading currencies like the pound and the dollar became strong only through deep and liquid markets. Daniel Gross gave the example of the euro because when the euro was launched, many people considered it a real challenger to the dollar. Europe's economy was large, institutions were strong, and there were no restrictions on capital movement. Even then, the euro could not replace the dollar. In IMF QUAFER data, the euro is the second largest reserve currency after the dollar, but it is far behind the dollar. Reuters, based on IMF data, reported that in the third quarter of 2025, the dollar's share was around 57% and the euro's share was around 20%. Now think about it. If a currency bloc like the euro, which has developed economies, strong institutions, and open capital markets, could not replace the dollar, then how big a challenge does China's yuan face in this race? The euro's weakness has been that Europe's bond market is fragmented. In America, the US Treasury market works like one huge unified safe asset, while in Europe, different countries like Germany, France, Italy, and Spain have separate bonds whose risk perception is different. This fragmentation prevents the euro from becoming a single global safe asset like the dollar. In China's case, the problem is even more complex. China's financial system is bank-centered. Its capital markets still do not provide the level of freedom and depth that global investors need. Daniel Gross's point was exactly this. Being a big exporter alone is not enough.
To make a currency global, there must be a market where the world's money can come without fear, stay there, and return without restrictions whenever needed. The yuan's second big problem is trust. Global investors do not look only at returns. They also look at rule of law, policy transparency, and regulatory stability. If regulations can suddenly change in a country, restrictions can be imposed on capital exit, or government intervention can change the market direction, then an investor fears holding that currency as a reserve. Trust is the biggest asset in a reserve currency, and trust is built not only by economic size, but by institutions. China has taken several steps to internationalize the yuan. Efforts have been made to increase the use of the yuan in cross-border trade settlement. Yuan settlement has increased with Belt and Road countries. After Western sanctions on Russia, some countries intensified the discussion around dollar alternatives. Even then, the yuan holds a very small share in global reserves. Reuters, based on IMF data, had reported that at the end of 2024, the Chinese yuan's share in global reserves was around 2%. This number tells the whole story. China is a very big player in global trade, but in the reserve currency market, the yuan is still far behind the dollar and the euro. This means that countries may buy goods from China, trade with China, but when it comes to keeping their savings and reserves, they still consider the dollar safer. Another big advantage of the dollar is the lock-in effect. Daniel Gross also highlighted this point. When everyone is using the dollar, why will people change it?
If oil is priced in dollars, global debt is issued in dollars, trade contracts are made in dollars, central banks keep dollar reserves, and investors run toward the dollar during a crisis, then this network effect makes the dollar even stronger. Understand it in simple language like this. If all shopkeepers in a city are using one payment app, customers are also on the same app, suppliers are also on the same app, then even a new app with better features cannot capture the market immediately, because the entire system is already locked into one system. The dollar is also such a global financial network. To change it, the world needs not just an alternative currency, but an alternative trust system. The discussion of a BRICS currency also happens in this background. Countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa have definitely talked about reducing dollar dependency. Local currency trade settlement is also increasing. But creating one common BRICS currency is very difficult because BRICS countries' economies, inflation, trade structures, political systems, and monetary policies are different. A common currency is not created just by a political statement. It needs shared institutions, common monetary rules, and deep financial integration. The euro itself is a big example of this. The euro was created because Europe built economic integration, common rules, and an institution like the European Central Bank over decades. Even then, crises came inside the euro area, debt concerns emerged, and policy tensions remained between member countries. If a carefully built system like the euro could not replace the dollar, then the path of a BRICS currency is even more difficult. There is another dilemma in front of the yuan. If China wants the yuan to become a global currency, it will have to open its capital account, make financial markets more transparent, and leave the yuan's value more to market forces. But by doing this, China may lose control over its currency. If a lot of money suddenly leaves China, pressure can come on the yuan. If a lot of money enters, bubbles can form. This trade-off makes China cautious, meaning China wants two things at the same time. The yuan's international status should increase, and domestic financial control should also remain. But to become a global currency, some control has to be given up. The dollar is global because the world can freely trade dollar assets. If the yuan also wants to become like that, then China will have to give foreign investors more freedom. But this freedom is not an easy decision for China's political economic model. Transparency is also very important. Foreign investors want to know whether the data is reliable, whether courts are independent, whether policy will change suddenly, and whether regulatory action is predictable. If an investor feels that in a market, a political decision can change investment value at any time, then he will see that market as a limited reserve destination. This is why global investors are unable to leave the dollar despite criticism of it. Questions have definitely been raised on the dollar's dominance. US debt is rising, political polarization has increased, and because of the weaponization of tariffs and sanctions, some countries are looking for alternatives. In 2025, discussion intensified around dollar index movements and reserve share, but experts generally believe that even if de-dollarization happens, it will happen slowly. Reuters, while reporting on IMF reserve data, also said that despite small changes in the dollar's share, there is no situation where its dominance appears to be ending. The euro has some capacity to challenge the dollar, but that too is limited.
Daniel Gross said that even if the ratio of the dollar and euro changes a little, there will be no revolutionary change in the world's financial system. If the dollar moves from 3 toward 2.5, it may become a headline, but it will not immediately overturn the global monetary order. This means the dollar may weaken, but being replaced is a very different thing. A practical path for the yuan may be that it becomes stronger as a regional currency. The use of the yuan in trade settlement with Asia, Africa, and Belt and Road partner countries may increase. Energy deals may happen in yuan settlement. Some central banks may keep yuan reserves for small diversification. But there is a huge difference between regional usage and global reserve dominance. To become a global currency, a currency has to play 3 roles. First, becoming a trade invoicing currency. Second, becoming a financial investment and debt issuance currency. Third, becoming a central bank reserve currency. The yuan is making some progress in the first role, but in the second and third roles, it is far behind the dollar. Until global investors freely, confidently, and on a large scale hold yuan bonds and Chinese financial assets, the yuan will not be able to become a serious replacement for the dollar. The lesson for China is that export power is necessary, but financial trust is even more important. Japan was also once a major economy of the world, but the yen could not replace the dollar. The euro also became a strong alternative, but not a dollar replacement. China's yuan can learn from both these examples that currency internationalization is not just a trade policy, but a long journey of financial reform, legal credibility, and political trust. For countries like India too, this debate is important. India can think in the direction of rupee settlement, local currency trade, and diversified reserves to reduce dollar dependency. But India also knows that suddenly leaving the dollar is not practical. The dollar's role is very deep in oil imports, external debt, IT exports, remittances, and capital flows. That is why the world may be angry with the dollar, but moving away from the dollar is not easy. During Middle East tension or geopolitical conflict, this becomes even clearer. When fear increases, investors often move towards safe assets. Historically, the dollar and US Treasury have been considered safe havens. If in a crisis people begin running toward the yuan, then it can be said that global trust is changing. But such a big shift is not visible yet. For now, the yuan is a more controlled currency, while the dollar is also a crisis currency. In the end, the point is very simple. China is powerful, its trade is huge, its economy is large, and the international use of the yuan may increase. But beating the dollar is not just a game of economic size. For that, an open capital account, deep bond market, transparent rules, independent trust, free convertibility, and global investor confidence are needed. And these are the areas where the yuan is still far behind the dollar.
If this video has taught you something new, or if you feel this information should reach more people, don't forget to like and share the video. Your small share can become valuable and useful information for someone else. If you have any questions related to this topic, or if you would like to share your opinion with us, be sure to write in the comment box. We read every question and suggestion from you, because your feedback inspires us to create better content. And if you want to keep receiving such interesting and reliable information about business, the economy, and the world in the future, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel GRT Business and also press the bell icon so that you get notifications of every new video directly. At GRT Business, we always strive to provide you with accurate, balanced, and reliable information. Our news and analysis are prepared based on information obtained from various news agencies, public sources, and public opinion. We make every effort to verify and validate each fact as much as possible. But in case of any possible error or dispute, the responsibility lies with the respective sources. Our only aim is to present you with a correct and trustworthy perspective so that you can understand any topic better.